This meeting is being recorded.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena Yopakuruttam Parvaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranchaliranatosmi Stuve Patanjalim Vyasam Shankaram Chamunitrayam Katra Sutrasya Bhashyasya Kramat Vivaranasya Cha. We were discussing the 47th Sutra last time, I think last session. Prayatna Shaithilya Ananta Samapatibhyam. Of course, before that we discussed Sthiram Sukham Asanam. Sthira Sukham Asanam, that means. What is Asana? We already described. So, you find in any yoga, any book dealing with yoga, or any tradition related to meditation or spiritual practice, you find one is expected to sit straight with the body, the spinal cord, the neck and the head in straight line. This is the external posture. So here we should remember, this is part of the Ashtanga Yoga. This is necessary at the beginning of one's spiritual journey, especially when you practice pranayama, pratyahara and dharana. This physical posture is essential. Now, one question will arise, and frequently people do ask these questions. Is it necessary that one should always sit like that? All spiritual seekers should be sitting and standing in the physical posture. Then where do you place Ramana Maharshi? You can see his posture, very relaxed posture with a smile. And you can find similar postures if you watch the pictures, the photos of the great Vedantins, great monks. So they are so relaxed. So we should remember, this posture is important only from the standpoint of the spiritual disciplines that we practice involving asana, pranayama, pratyahara and dharana. When a spiritual seeker reaches the level of samadhi in yoga tradition, or let us say the Advaita experience Vedanta tradition, when your mind automatically gets focused on higher ideals, then this physical posture is not so indispensable. You may sit in an easy chair, still you can concentrate mentally on a great spiritual ideal. This is an important point to remember. But if you practice pranayama especially, this is very important because it directly affects the flow of the air and also the consequent effects on the body and nervous system as part of the flow of air when you breathe in or breathe out, whether you practice Puraga or Rechaga, and especially Kumbhaga, this straight posture is important, as you normally mentioned in the yoga books or any books related to meditation. But in Vedantic tradition, when you reach a stage where your mind automatically flows to a higher transcendental spiritual ideal, then you may sit in an easy chair, you may lie down, you may have any posture, your mind automatically goes to a higher spiritual ideal. It doesn't flow towards the lower levels of the mental system or the physical system, but goes to a transcendental ideal. Then this posture is transcendent. You go beyond the necessity for assuming this posture. So that's why I mentioned, Ramana Maharshi's posture, you can easily imagine. He is not always sitting in a straight line posture. But there are some photos and pictures that you can get when he was a young person who was practicing meditation. You can find him sitting straight. So all these are very, very, very important to remember. So this is an important point to remember. That's why one important qualification is mentioned here. Prayatna Shaithilya Ananda Samapatibhyam. Prayatna Shaithilya means, see, when you have to take up an intense work, that is labor, when there is something forced, labored, then what happens, it means that you are not really acquired mastery over that. Suppose you have to write a poem and you work hard and write a poem. I don't think your poem will be worth reading. If you work hard, struggle, and with great effort you write a short story, it won't be a great classic. You are able to write a great poem or compose music or whatever it is when that music captures you, possesses you. When the poem possesses you. When, let us say, in Hindu monotheistic tradition, when goddess Saraswati captures you by the throat, then the goddess of learning expresses and manifests through you, then only a great classic is born. But you work hard, you hammer, work hard, labor, and write something. It may be passable. There are people ready to tolerate it, but nobody will be inspired by it. So that's an important point to remember. Prayatna Shaithilya means the absence of labor or effort is a characteristic of mastery in anything, so to speak. So what happens, this effort gets reduced. How? Ananda Samapatti. Ananta is a mythical serpent who is supposed to hold the entire cosmos. Is a serpent, and is supposed to bear the whole weight of the entire cosmos. It is a mythological concept, you can say. It's a part of the ancient Hindu mythology. And the Ananta is a very powerful serpent. That means it bears the whole weight of the cosmos on its hood without any effort. And it doesn't have to work hard. It's very light. The entire cosmos, or let us say the earth, sits on its hood and it doesn't feel any effort, any labor. It's perfectly sthira sukham, means it can bear that weight for a long time with perfect relaxation. Now, if you can meditate on this phenomenon, let us say a huge serpent bearing effortlessly the entire weight of the cosmos without feeling any effort. You can visualize or meditate. Then what happens, it's easy for you to acquire this state of steadiness and relaxation even when you are practicing meditation, dharana or dhyana. So that's the idea behind. So Patanjali has taken this concept from Hindu mythology. Of course, there are many mythologies which will link Patanjali himself to Ananda. He is an incarnation of Ananda. There are many stories. I am not going to those areas which you can read. It's helpful to understand the mythological background. It's not factual, but mythology helps you to understand and to master certain higher ideas in philosophy. Mythology does have a role in making certain things clear. So that idea is taken into the sutra. That's why it's called Ananda Samapatti. This sometimes called this Sankarshana, the goddess Sankarshana. Again, mythological concept of God, which can bear. It has got 1,000 heads and it can bear the entire weight of the entire cosmos. That's the idea behind. That means one should be able to sit without any feeling that you have a body. I mean, one should be able to sit and still not feel the presence or the existence of his or her body. Because when you feel you have a body, when you are sitting, it means your mind is taken away from the focus of meditation and it flows towards the body, which should not happen. One should be able to transcend body consciousness or the awareness of the body. So you can find yet there are certain statements in the commentaries. Yatno paramat siddhyati asanam means the point is, So when you have a lot of effort, it's likely that you feel a lot of effort, shaking of the body, feeling the existence of the body, slight pain. Maybe if an ant bites you, you feel the pain. So when you sit fully focused, you don't feel any of this pain. That's an idea behind. That's why uprightness, relaxation, effortlessness, and fixing the mind on the infinite. And there is another interpretation. Ananta also means the infinite, the transcendental. That is the real literal meaning of Ananta. Means that which is not finite, which has no end, no anta, which is Ananta, which is infinite, which is transcendental. So once you meditate on the transcendental, you actually transcend the awareness of this body. So this is the idea behind. And then the next sutra is Tataha Dunda Anabhighadaka. That is the 48th sutra. Tataha. From this, Tata means from this. It means from this asana siddhi or asana jaya. From this mastery of asana, mean the ability to sit in this posture with steadiness, with feeling no effort, and for a long time. From this what happens? Dunda anabhigataka means, dunda means thirst, hunger, cold, heat, success, failure, good, bad, the desirable, the non-desirable, all this. So what happens, your mind will not go towards these duals, the opposites. That's the idea behind. Of course, in the other Vedantic scriptures, you get some deeper idea. Yadhadipo nivadasto nengade sopamasmada. You find a Gita, for example, Lord Krishna says, you should be able to sit. Your mind should be like a flame of a lamp which is protected from strong winds around. It means the winds don't impact the flame; it remains steady. And also there are verses in the Gita which perhaps we have more important to discuss, but still which are related to the context. One idea you find in the Gita, Lord Krishna makes it very clear. One should sit with the spinal cord, the neck, and the head on a straight line, and then one should focus on the middle of the two eyes above, and then that is an advanced state. That is not mentioned in the Gita, but it's an advanced state. And then at the beginning, one should focus on the tip of the nose. So this is an important point, remember, in meditation, general practice, in yoga and Vedanta. 3 types of meditation you find. There are different levels, different ways of classifying meditation. One is meditating on a focus that you visualize to be existing within your own heart. Hridaya Padma, like a lotus flower, lotus within your own heart. The other one is for focusing on the tip of the nose. The third one is focusing on the Bhrumadhya. Meditation on Bhrumadhya, middle of above the nose, middle of the forehead. It is linked to meditation on the transcendental impersonal concept of Advaita Vedanta. That's an advanced state of meditation. If a beginner begins or practices that kind of meditation, he can cause headache, he can cause some other problems. So one should not meditate and meditate in the Bhrumadhya, this side. And for a devotee, if you have in any tradition, you can always meditate on the presence of the divine, whatever tradition you may belong to, being seated in the center of your own being, in your heart. And as a yoga practice, as a physical practice, for a beginner, it is recommended that one should try to look at the tip of the nose. Now, Shankaracharya, writing a commentary on this verse, makes it very clear, one should not be focusing on the tip of the nose as if focusing or looking at the tip of the nose. You should not be looking at the tip of the nose. You should not close your eyes, then what you will be meditating upon will be darkness. You should not open your eyes, then the external objects will distract. So this is an important thing. One should not completely close the eyes. That will create, either one may go to sleep or you may meditate on something that is dark. And one should not keep the eyes completely open. That can cause distraction, because visual objects can distract your mind away from the focus of meditation, whether it's a deity or a mantra or whatever it is. But one should sit in such a way as if, not exactly, but as if you are looking at the tip of the nose. That means eyes are neither completely closed, not completely open, but as if you are sitting at the tip of the nose, which means you are not actually focusing. Your eyes don't get concentrated, focused on anything visual in front of you. So there is no distraction. At the same time, eyes are not closed. So these ideas you find in the Gita, especially in Shankaracharya's commentary, which we'll discuss when we discuss dharana, because dharana is actually what we normally practice when we practice meditation, whether mindfulness meditation or whatever meditation. The meditative practices that we actually practice, which are taught in many places all over the world today, is not dhyana as understood in the Patanjali system, but it is dharana, the first stage in the process of concentration. That is the 6th, 7th and 8th. Dharana, dhyana, samadhi. 3 stages, of which the first stage in meditative disciplines is dharana. So when we discuss that subject, we will take up this again. So right now, coming back to the subject, if you can visualize, let us say, this huge mythological serpent bearing the entire weight of the cosmos, without any effort, without feeling the weight of the cosmos or the earth that it is bearing. Now, remember, this is only a mythological concept. Patanjali wrote these sutras maybe 4th century BC. So he has taken his imageries, his comparisons, his allegories from the mythological books which are popular during his time. That's why the word is used, Ananta Samapatti. It can have 2 interpretations. Ananta in Sanskrit means the infinite. You meditate on the infinite. That's one possibility, one possible interpretation. The other interpretation, you think, you visualize this huge, mighty being that is bearing the weight of the entire cosmos without any effort. So if you do that, you'll be able to sit like that without feeling any pain. Any forced effort to meditation, to practice meditation, can be risky, can create headache, can create nervous tension. I've seen this happening in our own temple. Not long ago, before the pandemic, some very wonderful people who are very devoted, total strangers whom I have not met, were sitting there as the whole muscles, bulging muscles, full of effort. They're struggling to keep themselves straight and focused. With the effort, the painful struggle can be clearly seen on the face, the expression. That is not healthy, that can create conflicts, so that should be avoided. It should be relaxed, effortless, natural way. So one can think of, a spiritual seeker can read some higher books that he may like, he or she may like, listen to some wonderful spiritual music, soothing music, can think of something higher and sublime, and then prepare the mind and get the mind relaxed, bring the mind into a state of total relaxation, and then start practicing all these meditation. It will be easy and it will be healthier for the mind. That's all. So that's why, then what happens, Dvandva anabhigata means then you won't be impacted, you won't be affected by whether there's a wound in the body, or whether you have not had food, you didn't have your lunch, or you feel thirsty. Thirst, hunger, all these things can be avoided if a person gets established in this asana. It's called asana siddhi, or mastery in asana practice. That's the idea behind. So that's the significance of this 48th sutra. The next sutras, of course, we'll discuss that. One is Tasmin Sadi Shwasa Prashwasayoho Gadi Vichedaha Pranayama. So pranayama is described here, which is a very, very important subject here. Tasmin Sati. That means when you get established in this asana siddhi, when you are already mastered in this asana posture, then shwasa prashwasa yoho. So you have to remember, shwasa means prashwasa. That means shwasa actually means bringing the air within. Prashwasa means breathing out. And then Gadi Vicheda means you have breathe in and you keep the breath within. It's called retention. So let us say it's called Puraga. Puraga means inhaling, breathing in. Rejaga means exhaling. That is Prashwasa. That is, so Shwasa means breathing in, inhaling. Rejaga means exhaling or Prashwasa. And then Gadi Vicheda. The moment of the breath is Vicheda, it is stopped, broken. How? It means Kumbhaka. That is the meaning of Gadi Vicheda. So these are three types of pranayamas mentioned here, and later Patanjali will take up the fourth one in the 51st Sutra. Now let us discuss this subject. The one important point to remember is, of course, before we continue this subject, I want to mention that point. If a spiritual seeker, not even a spiritual seeker, you may be one need not necessarily be interested in spiritual life, but if he may be interested in yoga asana, if he practices minimum your pranayama, let us say just breathing in shwasa and prashwasa, breathing out, exhaling, there is no risk in that if he does it only in a very moderate way. If the same person, on the other hand, this general principle, if he practices retention, it's called kumbhaka. There are two types of kumbhakas. One is anta kumbhaka, where you breathe in and then stop breathing out. That breath is, that means you inhale and you don't exhale. Keeping the breath within is called anta kumbhaka. And you breathe out and don't breathe in, and it's called bahikumbhaka. So anyway, any kind of retention can be risky and dangerous unless a person follows certain rules and regulations in food, in what he eats and drinks, and also his associations, and also his general discipline of life. This is very, very important. On the other hand, you find in many places this is taught, but but they are specifically asked not to practice for long, just minimum 4 or something like that. Then there is no risk, because retention of the breath within actually generates heat if you do it too much. The danger is if a person listens to some lectures and then some YouTube and then becomes enthusiastic about practicing this pranayama, and then when he does it for a few days, any kind of pranayama, if you do for a long time, it can generate heat and energy, and this energy will express itself in the form of extreme enthusiasm. You get energized, so I shall do more of this. That can be risky. That can lead to trouble. So that can be problematic, and along with that you drink a huge quantity of coffee or tea, and still worse, which I don't go into deeper, then it can really a recipe for disaster. But on the other hand, if somebody practices moderately without much, just 4 times breathing, 4 times breathing out, not for a long time, these rules are given, in any book you find. Without retention, there is no risk. Retention can be risky and problematic because it can, according to certain books and traditions, it hyperactivates or over-energizes certain nervous systems. And that's why you feel extreme energy and enthusiasm, which sometimes can manifest in the form of, can take the form of extreme talkativeness, sometimes it can lead to manic manifestations of energy, which can be led by in the opposite, polar opposites, which I am not going to discuss right now. So these are the important things one should keep in mind. If you have got more questions, you can ask during discussions. So now here the point is, tasmin sati, only after having fully accomplished asana jaya, that means fully established, one can practice shwasa, prashwasa and gati vicheda. That means puraga, rechaga and kumbhaka. Not before that. That's the idea behind. Of course, there are very, very, very important ideas which are expressed here in the yoga books. That's the reason, there's a great reason for it, If anyone practices pranayama and pratyahara after acquiring some degree of, some level of self-restraint and self-control, then it will be beneficial. Otherwise, it can be dangerous. So, actually, Vyasa himself, Vyasa and others, Bhava Ganesha, Nagoji Bhatta, all these commentators, with a great psychological insight, they have pointed out this. They have given this quotation, they have given this commentary while dealing with Pratyahara, but it also is related to pranayama. Let us see what Vyasa and Bhava Ganesha says. The central point is, for those who have acquired some degree of self-control, self-mastery, living a disciplined life, not taking alcoholic things and not taking things which are extremely bad for our mental health, and those who are following certain disciplines. For such people, what happens, your senses will follow the mind. And for those who are not self-restrained, what happens? Mind follows the senses. Now, how shall I explain this? Needs some explanation. Suppose a person is not self-controlled, living a very indisciplined life, wayward life, impulsive life. What happens? And he acquires some powers of concentration, because asana, after asana comes pranayama will be followed by pratyahara. Pratyahara means you are actually taking the senses away from external things. It is the beginning of meditative practice leading to dharana. Let us see later. Now, let us now think about what this actually means. For those who are not self-controlled and self-disciplined, their mind will follow the senses. Ajidendriyana, manasa, indriya, gojaratvam, means here. Those who are ajidendriya, those who are not self-controlled. The idea is, when you don't have self-restraint or self-control yourself, then if you focus on something, your mind will acquire great potency. So what happens, but senses are uncontrolled, the senses will become hyperactive, hyper-energized. Senses are not controlled. You are not fully established in yamas and niyamas. Suppose somebody is not fully established in yamas and niyamas, which actually will be self-control, sense control. But you practice pranayama, and then pranayama will lead to an increase in your mental power, a power to concentrate on a single object or a single work for a long time. That power can be acquired by some kind of pranayama, no doubt. Kumbhaka can help. But senses are not under your control. What happens, this increased power of mind will hyperactivate these unrestrained senses. So such person, suppose a person is prone to violence, if he practices this pranayama, pratyahara, etc., he will become more violent. If he is greedy, he will become more greedy. If he is restless, he will become more restless. Why? Because senses are not under control, but you are trying to increase the power of your mind. So the power of the mind should be increased to pranayama, pratyahara, etc., only after senses are brought under some degree of control and discipline. So that's what happens to a person who has not succeeded in achieving any degree of yama, niyamas and self-control, but he has somehow tried to increase the power of his concentration, power of mind. It can be problematic. The other example is for those who are fully established in yamas and niyamas, achieved some degree of self-control, sense control and self-control, let us say. What do you call self-mastery in popular language? Or sense control. For such a person, what happened? Senses are controlled. The senses will obey the mind. So, if you are already fully established in yamas and niyamas, your senses do not flow to undesirable negative channels. The tendency for violence is blocked by practicing ahimsa. The tendency to tell lies is blocked by practicing satya. The tendency for greed is blocked by asteya and aparigraha. Like that it happens. Purity of mind is increased by practicing Isapranidhana and Swadhyaya and so on. So what happens, because senses are already within control. Such senses will act like obedient servants of mind. Your mind will become your friend. Otherwise, mind will become your enemy if you are not fully established in sense control at the beginning before taking up the task of increasing power of concentration through pranayama, etc. In fact, Vyasa has got a very graphic, very interesting way of explaining this. So I shall read Vyasa's bhashya here. Svishaya samprayoga bhave chittaswarupānukāraha ivaiti chitta virodhe chittavad niruddhani indriyani na idrendriya jevad upayantram apakshate. Yatha madhukara raja makshiga utpadantam anutpadanti nivishamanam anunivasanti tatha indriyani chitta nirodhi niruddhani ityesha pratyahara. This is actually a commentary on pratyahara, but is relevant at this stage itself. When you take up pranayama. Pranayama is the first direct step towards increasing power of the mind. That's now the idea is now, and there is an imagery given here. Just as bees follow the course of the queen bee and rests when the queen bee rests, so when the mind stops, the senses also stop their activities. What happens, when the senses are already controlled or brought under some degree of control through yama and niyamas, then the senses which are compared to the ordinary bees. Ordinary bees follow the instruction of the queen bee. That's it. The example is taken from the world of bees. The queen bee, whatever she does, the rest of the bees will follow, if the senses are under control. That's the idea behind. If mind is ready for increasing its power and power of concentration, its higher mental faculties, then before that you must have already controlled the senses. Then the senses will obey the mind. Otherwise, it's by like queen bee following so many other bees, which doesn't happen in the world of bees. What happens is, if mind follows the senses, there is disaster. If the senses follow the mind, there is yoga, there is peace of mind, there is tranquility. So that's the idea behind. So I have just quoted this because this is an important sutra even in the context of pranayama. Now, in the 50th sutra, there is again a continuation of this discussion of pranayama, which we are going to discuss now. Bahya abhyendara stambha vrittihi deshakala sankhyaabhiki paridrushto dirgha sukshmaha. So, this pranayama is now being explained. Sapranayama. This pranayama, bahya abhyendara stambha vritti. Bahya vritti, abhyendara vritti, and stambha vritti means. This is already discussed here. Bahya vritti, it means you have breath out, keeping the breath outside. It is, that is bahikumbhaka. And then abhyendara vritti, you breathe in and keep it there. Stambha vritti. Stambha vritti actually neither breathing in nor breathing out, but keeping the breath in whatever state it is. That is called stambha vritti. That means puraga, rejaga, and kumbhaka. These ideas are behind. So, bahya means So again I shall explain. Bahya means stopping breath after exhaling. Bahya kumbhaka. Stopping breath after exhalation. That is Bahya kumbhaka. Abhyantara kumbha means stopping of breath after inhaling. That is called Andara kumbhaka or Antar kumbhaka. Stambha means neither external nor internal kumbhaka, but in between, when the breath is stopped suddenly by a single effort. It's called Sagrita Prayatna, like Vyasa says. I'm not going to those details, the technical things which were normally discussed only in a class focused on pranayama. But anyway, the main point is these are three types of pranayama mentioned here. One important point to remember is Patanjali, if you read Patanjali's Sutra, you find, according to Patanjali, pranayama means only kumbhaka. So that is an important point to remember. The Bahya kumbhaka, Abhyantara kumbhaka and Stambha, where retention is involved. So he perhaps he did not take into consideration the later developments in this pranayama system, which must have been the contributions of the later teachers. Of course, you can find hints of this in the commentaries, but mostly in the works of the great yogasana teachers, they may have developed this Puraga, Rejaga and Kumbhaka, for breathing in, breathing out. All that must have been developed by later years. Which, according to Patanjali, if you read his sutras, it's clear that so far as he is concerned, pranayama means stambha. That's what it is. Kumbhaka. It means breathe. What is Bahya, the external stoppage, Abhyantara, internal stoppage, and Stambha, neither external nor internal, according to him. In the 51st Sutra, he discusses a fourth one, which is it's called Kevala Kumbha in the Patanjala system, which requires a lot of detachment, which is actually a springboard to dharana. So, when you reach the dharana state, you must have already acquired mastery in pranayama, which means you must have already acquired mastery in stambha or kumbhaka. It's called Kevala Kumbhaka. That's what Patanjali means here in his next sutra, that is 51st one, where he mentions, Bahya Abhyantara Vishakshepi Chadurthaka. That means Bahya Abhyantara Vishakshepi. That is, I shall explain this. The fourth pranayama, it's Chadurtha, fourth pranayama, which actually suppresses the spheres of both external and internal pranayama. Chadurthastu Swasa Praswasayohu Vishya Avadharanat Kramena Bhumi Jayat Ubhayabheksha Purvaku Kritya Bhavaha Pranayama Chadurtha. So the idea is the fourth one, it transcends by suppressing the spheres of both the external and internal. It's a kind of transcendental pranayama. That's the idea behind. So according to Vyasa, what he says, Vishaksheni means transcending, going beyond all the three types of pranayamas already mentioned earlier. That's the idea behind. Now, in the 52nd Sutra, Patanjali mentions what happens when you reach this stage. Tataha kshiyade prakashavaranam. Tata means here, by this pranayama, what happens? Prakashavaranam means there is a light within us, and that light becomes manifest by practicing Ashtanga Yoga. And that should happen gradually. At the first stage, what happens? All the kleshas, all the remnants of samskaras get completely removed by this pranayama. The fourth pranayama is called Kevala Kumbhaka. This is Patanjali's view. Okay, many of these ideas are not directly linked to our everyday practice in any, but still, because we are discussing this Patanjali system, so I have to explain a few things related to this. But a few things about pranayama we should always mention. One is, I mentioned this earlier, but I want to explain this further. Why the yoga teachers, including the commentators, insist that one should never take up pranayama without being established in yamas and niyamas? That is one subject. Second subject is why Patanjali doesn't consider Puraka and Rejaka as part of pranayama. Maybe in those days, that's the only way we can understand. In those days, it was a common practice, Puraka and Rejaka, which is actually part of any meditative process in Hinduism and Buddhism, and also in the puja rituals, worship rituals. It is an integral part of every kind of worship, this pranayama. That's why he specifically doesn't mention Puraka and Rejaka here. He speaks only about Stambha or Kumbhaka in this context. So that's why he says any kind of retention can lead to negative effect if the practitioner has not already succeeded in restraining his senses to some extent. Of course, according to strict rules, you should have completely acquired a mastery of yamas and niyamas. Because practice of yamas and niyamas blocks the door opening to negative channels. Now, what are the doors opening to negative channels? I already hinted just now. A normal human being is under the control of his samskaras, his vrittis, his vasanas, his impressions, his habits, and so on, acquired in innumerable life cycles. Pranayama, pratyahara, and dharana will shake the entire lake. So, our human personality can be compared to a lake. There are so many layers in that lake. There is some pure water on the surface, but below there are many layers, dust, bacteria, and so on. When you practice pranayama, especially kumbhaka, stambha is mentioned here, it's called stambha vritti here. What happens? It's just like taking a huge pole, a stick, and you stir this lake. And lot of undesirable things will come to the surface. Now, all these should be filtered out of the lake, of the water of the lake. How do you filter out? Through the practice of yamas and niyamas. So if a person practices yamas and niyamas properly, he will be completely free from our natural human impulses, which express themselves in so many different ways, in the form of violent tendencies, greed, a desire for possessing things that do not belong to us, and a kind of recklessness, crude impulses, tendencies, which not necessarily coming from this life, but previous life cycles. And they may overflow, and they may create problems. That's why it's mentioned Ajitendriya, those who are not acquired mastery yamas and niyamas. If the person practices pranayama, what happens? The senses are still outside control, out of control. But mind becomes strong. So these crude tendencies can become strong if you practice some kind of forced meditation and so on. Remember, I am not discouraging meditative practices, not at all. We are only talking here about the high level, high profile pranayama practices, not normal pranayama which normally taught in many places. That's good for health, good for peace of mind. When you practice at the moderate level, it is certainly good. Here we are talking, when Patanjali talks, you remember he is like a mighty big teacher sitting above somewhere in far distant remote world. So he is actually laying down these rules which we are discussing. So what he means here is that before we take up extremely complicated and highly complex, intense pranayama practices, one should take care to be established in some of these important disciplines. That's the only implication here. Now you can ask questions. I believe many of these ideas can be made more clear during the interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions. We should remember, nobody is discouraging the practice of pranayama or anything, not at all. I am just trying to explain to you that Patanjali says, according to Patanjali, highly complicated and formal pranayama practices should be taken up, keeping in mind the importance of certain important disciplines called yamas and niyamas. That's the only purpose behind this. That's most welcome questions.
Which I had one question.
Yeah.
So in verse 50, you commented on the Bhakya Abhyantara Stambha Vritti.
Oh, yeah.
There's another Deshakala Sankhya Bhi.
Oh, I shall explain.
Paridrishto Dudhirga Sukshma, that you didn't comment on.
Yeah, oh, okay, very good. You just explained to me now. Now, Bahya Abhyantara Stambha Vritti Deshakala Sankhya Bhi Paridrishtaha Dirgha Sukshmaha. Now, this pranayama has got an external manifestation, Bahya, an internal manifestation, Abhyantara, and then retention, Stambhavritti. Now, when it is practiced, when you observe, when you analyze, according to space and time, desha means space, time means kala, and number, sankhya, then it has got this dirgha and sukshma. What it means is, it becomes of long duration, that is dirgha, or it can be subtle. Subtle here means sakhalu ayamevam abhyasto dirgha sukshmaha. That means it can be for a long time you can practice, or it can be practiced in a subtle manner. So when a person gets established in the practice of this pranayama, at one stage it takes a subtle form. It becomes, according to some commentators, subtle pranayama means natural pranayama. It's called effortless pranayama. Those who become established in this, they will be able to regulate the breathing in a systematic manner, and that leads to purity of mind, tranquility of mind. That's the idea behind.
In verse number 52, it says Tata Kshiyate Prakasha.
Oh, yeah. Tataha Kshiyate
Prakasha. That is the covering of the light is decreased.
Yeah, actually what it means, here the avarana, Tata Kshiyate Prakasha avarana. Prakasha actually means the inner light, inner purity. It is covered by an avarana, means a veil. What is the avarana? Kleshas are the avaranas. Kleshas. The only avidya, asmita, ragadesha, abhinivesha. These kleshas slowly start getting removed by decrease. That's the idea behind. Tataha means here. Actually, at this stage, even from the pranayama stage itself, when you practice tampa, many of these old samskaras will disappear. Because if a spiritual seeker is not free from kleshas, he will not be able to even achieve asana siddhi. To be able to sit for a long time without any distraction, with total effortlessness. It requires some degree of purity. And this purity here means disappearance, vanishing of the veil which conceals the light within. The light is our true nature, that we are the Purusha, we are the Chaitanya.
See, on this light has got cross-cultural appeal. There is, in English they use the term to be enlightened.
Yeah, you can
that there is,
enlighten.
You see a Swami is chant Tatra Suryo Bhatin Chandra Tarakam.
Yeah, that's that is the Upanishads, Upanishad. We should, of course, Patanjali uses many of these terms in his own specific implication. So,
but Swamiji, can you comment on the light within? Because even in the Arma Prashna we say Aditya Nagastane Swatejasa Bhani.
Yeah.
In place of the sun, use your own light.
Anyway, the interesting subject. But now in Atman there are many verses in the Upanishad literature which will direct you to meditate upon Atman within as Antarjyoti. Antarjyoti means light within. So that is one of the meditative practices. In the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is a long dialogue, discussion between Janaka and Yajnavalkya. It's called Jyoti Brahmanam, it's called. Where Atman is called Jyotisham Jyoti, the light of lights, the Antarjyoti. So it is the Jyoti, the light within, the Atman, that enables our senses, our mind, our intellect, our every system that we have in our body and mind to become active, to become functional. That's an idea behind. So the discussion becomes like this when Yajnavalkya visits Janaka, who is a king, philosopher king in his court. Then there's a discussion, debate that begins. Janaka asked the question, what's the light that enables a person to move about, to do his things? Kim Jyotirayam, Kim Purush Jyotirayam, means what is the light? Then Yajnavalkya replies, first Surya Jyoti, then Chandra Jyoti, then Agni Jyoti, Vag Jyoti. The light as the physical light, the sunlight. There is no sunlight at night, there is moonlight. There is no moonlight or sunlight, then there is at least you strike a candle, that is Agni Jyoti. Suppose these three lights are not there, then you have got the word you hear. Because light here means the one which reveals. That's the meaning. Light here means the revealer. That why the one in whose presence things get revealed. So when you have no sunlight, no moonlight, no fire and no words coming, then still within your mind, within your being, at the center of your being, you have this inner light, Antarjyoti, Jyotisham Jyoti. It's called Atma Jyoti. So it's an important part of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So
it's a great metaphor. Light dispels darkness. So the light is what gives us the...
You can find this light as a symbol of enlightenment and knowledge and wisdom. You can find in many traditions. In many traditions you find the light functions as a great symbol of enlightenment, wisdom, knowledge, because when there is light, you come to know things, everything gets revealed, everything gets known. That's the idea. So, okay. But here it's different. It doesn't have that level of metaphysical implication in Patanjali's system. Yeah, it's a dualistic system. Patanjali won't agree with you, the Jyotisham Jyoti. He won't agree. He's a dualist. But it has got a great significance for those who want to understand the higher philosophy of Vedanta. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I should remind you again, I was never discouraging. I was never discouraging anyone in this pranayama or anything. What I mean to say, one should remember, Patanjali's understanding of pranayama is different from what we normally understand in popular books published these days, which are being following the the books like the well-known books like Herendra Samhita, Hatha Yoga Pratipika, all these books deal with different postures, and along with that, the great sages must have developed elaborate techniques involving different practices in pranayama system, which belong to the post-Patanjali period, which don't find mention in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. That's the idea behind.
Yogi, please ask your question.
Yeah.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah, namaskar.
The 50th sutra, there is Dirgha Sukshma.
Yeah.
Vivekananda translated it as long or short.
Yeah.
Another translation says it's spacious and subtle. How should we interpret that?
You mean Swamiji? Swami Vivekananda is long and subtle. And another one, space. I don't have
long or
long and
either long or short. That is
short.
Swami Vivekananda translation.
Yeah.
Page 121.
Yeah. I don't have the book with me, but Swamiji, I think Swamiji was following Vyasa's commentary. And there are other writers who must have followed other commentators. Minor differences will be there. Maybe Sukshma or short. Sukshma can be called short, actually subtly shorter than gross, that is long or bigger in that sense. So that translation doesn't seem to be very different one from the other. I don't think so.
Should it be or?
It could be, yeah, it could be, yeah, it could be. Of course, yeah, of course, I can explain a few things, You see, you can find certain words here, Desha Kala. Desha, it could mean this prana should be focused on certain parts of the body, or Kala could mean it could imply that amount of time for which you should be kept you should retain the prana. That could be and then so that can be the kala can mean the amount of time, amount of in modern time you may say minutes or whatever it is, for which the breath should be retained, either inner or outer. And the desha could mean in ancient times, when they used to do pranayama, they used to focus prana on certain parts of the body, visualizing. So when you strongly visualize, when you breathe and you visualize the prana focus on certain parts of the body, you can that can affect, if you have a illness or disease, if you focus prana on that part of the body, the illness, the disease can be cured through sankalpa. It's a strong sankalpa, determination. If you visualize yourself focusing prana on that part of the body, they used to believe that you can be cured. You can find the pranic healing and all that in the 19th century, later part of 19th century, many of these practices were experimented in the East Coast. Actually, I normally do not go beyond Patanjali's own system as commented by the traditional commentators. And they are very scientific and psychologically they are very rational. So that's the idea behind. Swami Vivekananda followed both Vyasa and Bhoja Vritti. Bhoja's interpretation is simple. Swami Vivekananda followed Vyasa and also Bhoja for the most part.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank
Do you know your question?
you. Yeah.
Hi, Swamiji. You talked about how doing things with a lot of intense effort doesn't lead to good results. For example, you mentioned the poetry example.
Could you, excuse me, could you slow down your conversation? I'm not able to fully understand. Okay. Yeah, please.
So you mentioned at the beginning about how doing things with intense effort sometimes doesn't lead to good outcomes.
Yeah.
For example, you talked about poetry and another example. How should we approach new things that we are not skilled at and that do require lots of intense effort to get good at? Should we just not do them, or how should we get to the point where we can do them without intense effort?
That's right. I was referring to one important aspect in the asana, when describing asana. So prayatna shaithilya means, see, one should be able to sit without feeling any strain, any effort, and for a long time in a state of perfect relaxation. When that ability is mastered, it is called asana siddhi. One has acquired the ability to sit, to practice this asana. Asana only means not the postures, but this particular kind of posture on which we can sit and practice pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, etc. The other following steps. Now, there I mentioned I was just giving an example. You see, some of the greatest works, especially in literature, mostly literature, I tell you, which includes poetry, novels, etc. Now, there you find some of the greatest masterminds. They whatever they wrote became classics, and a classic is born when it contains something that transcends the boundaries of time, country, culture, nationality. Certain great works, you remember, they remain sources of inspiration for the whole humanity. Now, and if you observe the personalities of those great masterminds, they achieved all this without much effort, which means they were tools in the hands of a higher transcendental power, and they became vehicles by which this higher creativity was produced. On the other hand, you can find an opposite example. Those who work hard, again struggling hard in explain things and write something. You can find many people who go on writing, and they write a good number of mediocre works, but they don't write a classic. See, a man like Dostoevsky was fully drunk, and he himself did not read what he read. Brothers of Karamazov, and Tolstoy. There are many great writers, especially mystic poets, great poets. You find that they became tools in the hands of some higher power. And now those creative works are remembered. They become classics. So actually they did all this without any effort, without any strain. That's the idea behind. So I was just giving an example. Effortlessness signifies mastery. If you are a great poet, if you are a great musician, then you don't have to struggle very hard to sing well. Anybody for that matter. I'm just giving an example. In any area, effortlessness implies mastery. Asana siddhi here means the ability to sit for a long time in a state of perfect relaxation without any feeling of bodily involvement. That is called asana siddhi. That is the prerequisite for the other practice coming, pranayama, pratyahara, etc. Then I give the other example. I gave the example, one should not get away with the impression that every spiritual person should be always sitting like that, rim road straight. I don't mean that. In fact, people who are many other areas of work and responsibility, they're trained and they're expected to sit and stand and walk in that posture. But that do not make them yogis necessarily. So here effortlessness means mastery. So that's actually I gave that example in the context of this particular sutra, which I mean prayatna, shaithilya, ananta, samapatibhyam, that is mentioned here. It means when you acquire that level of mastery in asana, then you transcend the feeling of effort and strain. Just before that, there is no sthira sukham asana. That's the idea. Thank you for the question. I was giving an example.
What about if, for those of us who aren't masters at those things, how should we still strive for things that require intense effort, or is that a sign we should be doing those things?
You're right. There are great people. Of course, there are great people who achieve great heights in many areas through intense practice. Intense practice. That also is one way to achieve this level of mastery. I was giving example focusing on one aspect of the picture. The other side of the picture is there were great men and women who achieved great things through constant practice, consistent efforts. That's mentioned in the coming sutras. You find Dirghakala Nairantarya Satkara Asevido Dudabhumi. A practitioner of yoga discipline should continuously work hard and practice, repeat for a long time with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. That idea comes in many sutras also. So here in this particular context, asana siddhi context, I was giving one side of the picture. The other side of the picture is there are great men and women who achieve great things, who achieve great excellence in many areas, in science, in sports, in arts, in poetry, many areas, through hard work, continuous effort. That is the other side of the picture. Both are equally right. Okay? Thank you. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to clarify the point. Thank you.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you.
Hari Om, Swamiji.
Yeah.
Swamiji, so you were talking about dharana and dhyana, and you said that dharana is what we all think is dhyana today. When people practice meditation or teachers teach meditation, what they are teaching you is dharana. So what is the difference between these two? Is it qualitative or is it actually quantitatively different?
Yeah, it is both qualitative and also quantitative. So we will take up that maybe after maybe in the next session we will take up, because dharana, dhyana, samadhi are together called samyama. We will take up that in ascending order. First step is dharana. So what I wanted to tell during the lecture was that what we normally call meditation corresponds to what Patanjali means by dharana. That's the idea behind it. Of course, there are levels of meditation which can take you to dhyana, no doubt. But the word dhyana is used because the word dharana is not so well known. Dhyana is well known. So, normal practice of meditation that we do, it roughly corresponds to dharana. Isn't it? Of course, when a person practices dharana, at some level he will certainly enter the realm of dhyana meditation. Which there is no clear distinction in English language, perhaps, but Patanjali makes it different. That's all. Okay. When we discuss that subject, maybe in the next class, it becomes clear. It will become clear. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Maharaj, there is a question on YouTube.
Yeah.
My Gauri. A question not related to today's class.
Yeah.
So Swamiji generally notes that the two key aspects in one's sadhana are practices of vairagya.
Oh, abhyasa and vairagya. Yeah. Abhyasa means repeated effort, continuous repeated effort. As mentioned just now, there are great men and women who achieve great things in many areas through repeated practice, constant effort. I just mentioned just now while answering the previous question. There are many great men who achieve abhyasa and vairagya. Vairagya means renunciation, detachment, so on, and abhyasa means repeated effort or repetition.
Okay, Maharaj.
Yeah.
I'll let Dilip ask a question. There is one more question from YouTube after that. Right.
Namaskaram, Swamiji. Today you mentioned about asana, and you also mentioned about asana siddhi. I just want to clarify or confirm my understanding. Asana, of course, when you do meditation, there's asana, etc. But the asana in the yoga as a limb, does it refer to the yoga asanas where you can actually attain siddhis by practicing that, or what exactly is that siddhi that you can gain from asana? I just want to confirm.
Yeah, I think the major works that describe elaborately different yoga postures. Shiva Samhita, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and Gheranda Samhita. These are three well-known works, which Swami Vishnudevananda and Swami Sivananda Saraswati's Guru, they have all referred to this. So many modern teachers also refer to this. So these books must have been written during the post-Patanjali period. So Patanjali must have started this tradition. Of course, we have to remember, yoga tradition is supposed to be pre-Patanjali. Actually, Patanjali is not the originator of what we now call the yoga philosophy or yoga spirituality or psychology or anything. I'm talking about the Yoga Sutras. Patanjali codified. There must have been different schools, and Patanjali must be the codifier who put them together in 195 sutras, dividing into 4 chapters, which a number of teachers who came in his lineage must have enriched and reinforced by writing commentary like Vyasa, Shankaracharya, and then many Vijnana Bhikshu, Vajaspati, and Bhava Ganesha, Nagoji Bhatta, and so on. And even modern time, Bhaswati, Hariharananda Aranya, and so on. And in this century, there are also some modern books. So what I mean to say, these Hatha Yoga books must have originated much later, maybe after 14th century. These books I'm talking about, not the practices. Because many of the yoga practices can be found even in Mohenjo-daro relics you find. Indus Valley civilizations, some of the postures, they correspond to yoga postures. In the Ajanta Ellora caves, they belong to 4th or 5th century AD. Buddhist monks, you can find all the yoga postures, sitting Padmasana. Even look at Buddha's own popular image you find. The Gandhara school of Buddhist art you find, found in Greece, Afghanistan, belonging to 2nd century, 1st century BC, Buddha's postures, Padmasana, Sustikasana, you find. So Jaina monks also, who is a Jaina Vardhamana Mahavira was a contemporary, elder contemporary of Buddha. Buddhist Jaina monks, their imageries, you can find all yoga postures. So yoga postures which you practice today, not all, but sitting postures must have been very popular for a long time. But these great teachers must have codified, organized all this and put in book form, which eventually became popular. And surprisingly, I think historically speaking, it was Swami Vivekananda's introduction of yoga as Raj Yoga lectures which actually triggered this interest in Hatha Yoga. People would not have understood what yoga means. So Swamiji did not mean by yoga He did not mean yoga postures. Later you find in Divine Life Society was founded, and this great Swami Shivanandaji, he taught his disciples, which became widespread practice. So the Hatha Yoga tradition must be relatively speaking recent, maybe from 15th century onwards. These books must have become popular, of course. Okay.
One last question
Yeah.
from YouTube, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Nanjundas Mumayaji asks, in some Puranas, some sages and devotees meditate in various positions which seem to be not natural. It seems like they're very hard ones and not so comfortable.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's true. Actually, there were extreme practitioners during the times, but one of the most well-known and most authentic work, more authentic than Puranas, the Gita, Yukta ahara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmsu, yukta swapna avabodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. Yoga here means not yogasana, it means the higher spiritual life is not possible without some degree of moderation. So moderation was insisted upon in Buddhism and also in Hinduism. But as we mentioned, you can find many great ascetics who practice these great disciplines. That's true. It may be they may have felt it necessary to punish their senses and body, to put them under control. There have been certain sects, even now there are certain sects which insist on extreme forms of ascetic practices as part of their attempt to discipline their own senses, their own body. They do that and they have the arguments. Eventually they may also reach a level of moderation. So for a beginner it may be necessary. Sometimes you feel you have to practice some very strong disciplines to put your own mind or your own habits into some kind of a discipline. That must be the background behind this. Jaina monks were well known for extreme asceticism, and also many other Hindu ascetics were well known in ancient times.
thank you, Maharaj.
So thank you for these questions. Okay, so we will continue next week hopefully. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
The recording has stopped.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.